Welcome to NEXTGames, a guide to ninja series. In this episode, we will go over Elite Blade Metsu Gearsets. Blade Metsu is one of ninja's best weapon skills, but it often gets overlooked as it doesn't perform quite as well as Shun and Hai in low buff situations, such as when you are in a trust setup. However, as things such as attack go up from buffs, Blade Metsu starts to quickly go up in damage and easily surpasses both Blade Hai and Blade Shun in hyper-buffed situations. Blade Metsu is a great weapon skill that, similar to Blade Hai, will weapon scale with itself to make a level 4 dark skill chain. Metsu will also create a level 4 dark skill chain when used with Blade Hai, and a level 3 light skill chain if you use it with Blade Shun. This makes Blade Metsu the most versatile weapon skill available to ninja. Blade Metsu will also paralyze your enemy with an activation rate of about 10%, and its aftermath will increase your subtle blow by 10, making it possible to cap subtle blow without any gear by using MIOSHA. Its modifier is 80% dex, and it has a constant FTP modifier of 5. As mentioned previously, it responds very well to attack, so be sure to focus on it as well in your weapon skill set and not solely on the dex stat. Weapon skill damage gear also is very helpful, but is not as useful in low buff situations. Now, before we go into the gear sets, a good question to ask is, now when should I be using Blade Metsu? Well, now that we've covered a few weapon skills in these guides, we can start to compare them and see where they excel and where they fall behind in certain situations. So let's briefly compare all of them so that we can understand where Blade Metsu finds its use. First, let's look at a normal trust buff situation. This means we have capped haste and accuracy, but no other buffs other than Koru throwing out a Dia onto the mob for us. In that situation, if we select the best weapons and gear, then these are the DPS numbers that we would achieve. Now please note, this does not include potential skill chain or magic burst DPS numbers. So as you can see, in this situation, Blade Shun is our best weapon skill to use. Now we are using a Hishi Shiroken in that situation with a Fudo Masamune in our offhand. Now roughly 100 DPS behind that is Blade Hai, and in that situation we're using the Kanagi with a Fudo Masamune in our offhand. Now roughly 100 damage behind Blade Hai, there is Blade Metsu at 1793. Now in this situation we are using the Kikoku with the Fudo Masamune in our offhand. Now for Blade 10, it's a little over 100 damage behind where Blade Metsu is at this stage, at 1668 damage. In that situation, we're using a Hishi with a Fudo Masamune in our offhand. Blade Ku falls way behind at over 450 damage behind Blade 10, and in that situation we're using a Fudo Masamune on Path A with another Fudo Masamune in our offhand, and Blade Kamu falls way in last at 1077 damage, again using the Fudo Masamune Path A in our main hand, and another Fudo Masamune in our off. So as you can see, there's roughly a 350 DPS difference between our first place weapon skill Blade Shun and our fourth place weapon skill of Blade 10, with about a 100 DPS between each level. Let's see what happens if we add some low buffs from a Corsair trust and factor in things like Berserk, and what that does to these same numbers. In this example, all we are changing is we are putting Berserk up and adding Kultada for Chaos roll. Now there is no way for us to know exactly what number he's going to roll, so this will always change, but for this test we are assuming he's rolled a 4, his lucky number. So if we put up a Berserk and a Chaos roll with a lucky roll of number 4, Blade Metsu has now taken the number 1 spot at 2714 damage. Blade Shun is in second behind it at 2659, then Blade Hai at 2616, and Blade 10 at 2554. So what used to be spread between about 350 damage is now spread through less than half of that. Only about 150 damage spreads the top 4. And just in case you were curious how the other weapon skills were performing at this stage, Blade Ku is down to 1841 damage, and Blade Kamu is all the way back in 1572. Lastly, I'll just mention that all of the best-in-slot weapon options that I mentioned in the previous situation still hold true for this situation. However, when we go on to a hyper-buffed situation, that's when things are going to change. In this example, we are swapping out our trust for a well-equipped group of real-life people on Bard, Corsair, Geo, and Red Mage. They are hyper-buffing us to make sure our attack and accuracy are as high as possible. Now we've had a complete reversal of our top 4 compared to where we started out with our trust setup here. Now, as you can see, Blade 10, our previous 4th place contender, is now in 1st with 6,511 damage. Now, I will point out that this number is achieved by using a Hitaki in our offhand, which really can only be utilized on useful content if you're in this hyper buff situation, because of all the accuracy you'll lose by utilizing it. So just roughly 50 DPS behind that very specialized situation we just spoke of is Blade Metsu, and this is where it's come into form. It's doing 6,450 damage, and on our normal target of Apex bats we are achieving an average of 27,405 weapon skill damage. That, combined with both of its dark and light skill chain potential, really make it the ideal option in these hyper buff situations right alongside Blade 10. We are achieving this with a Kokoku in our main hand and a Tourette in our offhand, which has now become the best in-slot option for these high buff situations. In low buff situations, the base damage of the Fudo Masamune tends to take over and make it the best in-slot option for overall DPS. However, in these hyper buff situations, the low delay of the Tourette takes over and makes it the best in-slot option for overall DPS. At this hyper buffed level, Blade High is also responding quite well at 6,049 damage, so not quite as good as Metsu and 10, but still holding its own. This is achieved with a Kanagi and Tourette combination. And this brings us to Blade Shun, which we covered in our last episode of A Guide to Ninja. As you can see, Blade Shun is a tremendous weapon skill, and in fact the best weapon skill when you are in a trust setup. However, when you hyper buff yourself, it does not respond anywhere near as well as the other best 3, and it falls way behind almost to the ranks of Blade Ku and Kamu. Therefore, if you are in this hyper buff situation, you definitely want to leave Blade Shun behind and make sure you focus on 10 and Metsu, or at the very least High. Now our Blade Shun number here was achieved with a Hishi Shiroken and a Tourette in our offhand. Next is going to be Blade Ku at 3,996 damage. We achieved our best TPS numbers here with a Kokoku in our main hand and a Tourette in our offhand. And pulling up the rear, like usual, is Blade Kamu at 3,198 damage. We finally achieved this number with the Nagi and the Tourette in our offhand. Up until this point, it was actually better to have the Fudo Masamune Path A as our primary weapon, but thankfully the weapon that's designed to work with Blade Kamu, the Nagi, finally steps in here in a hyper buff situation. We'll be covering Blade 10, Blade Ku, and Blade Kamu in our next 3 videos to kind of show you how we achieve these numbers and what the best weapon skills are for those gear sets as well. So what conclusions can we draw from all these numbers? Well, first off, in trust setups, it is clear that Blade Shun is the winner, but Blade High and Blade Metsu are very close behind, and Metsu even pulls ahead when things like Berserk, and factoring in things like Kaltada's Chaos Roll if you're to use him. Additionally, when you factor in those things, all 3 are within about 100 DPS of each other, so really any of these 3 are acceptable in trust situations and will give very similar results. Blade 10 will fall behind in this situation and shouldn't be used due to its inability to make anything higher than a level 1 skill chain. Now in party setups, Blade 10 is best here, but only if you are totally hyper buffed to get past Hitaki's accuracy issues. Otherwise, Metsu is best here and doesn't require any of the fancy increased accuracy buffs to achieve similar numbers. Blade High is the 3rd best option here, with Blade Shun being the weapon skill to be completely avoided. Overall, Metsu really does appear to be the best, or close to it, in most situations. Okay, now that we've discussed how it compares, let's go ahead and delve into the gear that we'll be using in this set. First, let's talk about the main hand weapon. Here there's only a single option you should be choosing, and that is the Kokoku. It will increase your attack by 60, and the aftermath on it will increase your attack by an additional 10% and give you that 10 subtle blow we talked about. Additionally, this weapon will increase your Blade Metsu damage by 68%. It also will occasionally do triple damage on the first swing of an attack round. It does this about 16% of the time. There really is nothing else you even want to consider using with Blade Metsu. This weapon is the easiest of the Rimas to obtain in my opinion, so if you don't have any other Rimas, I would recommend you start with this one and get to work on it. For offhand weapons, we have different options depending upon whether you're in a trust setup or a hyperbuff party setup. In a trust setup, or where you don't have capped attack and accuracy, you definitely want to use the Fudo Masamune. The main reason you want to use it is for its base damage of 154, and the additional attack it will add for each Utsesumi Shadow that you have. Now if you're in a hyper buff situation, then you're going to want to go with as low delay as possible, And the best DPS option you can get is the Tourette with a delay of 180, and it'll also add 15 to your dex to help out just a little bit with your Blade Metsu damage. Next, we'll talk about the ammo slot. Here, the clear best in slot option is the Arglimir Orb +1. This will give you a strength boost of 7, a dex boost of 7, and an attack boost of 10. It's quite an expensive item. You can get it off the auction house for 100 million gil. Now, if you can't quite spring for that, the next best option is going to be the Veluspa Tathlum. This has a strength boost of 5 and a dex boost of 5, so 2 less than the orb, and the same attack of 10. And you can get this for 1,000 domain invasion points. Now, you're going to lose 15 DPS over the orb, but you'll have 1,000 million gil more in your pocket, so you make the decision of which one you want to go with. For the head slot, the best option is going to be the Hachiya Hatsuburi. This will give you a strength boost of 33 and a dex boost of 33, and will increase your weapon skill damage by 10%. For the neck, I suggest the Ninja Nodowa +2. It will give you a dex increase of 15 and a physical damage limit increase of 10%. You can get this at the auction house for 70 to 80 million gil. Then you need to further augment it through Dynamis D in order to get these stats. Next, let's move on to earrings. Here in the left ear, you should use the Odor Earring. This will give you a dex boost of 10. You can get this from Domain Invasion for 1,000 points. The right ear, you want to use the Lugra Earring +1. This will give you a strength boost of 8 to 16 and a dex boost to 8 to 16 depending on time of day. You can get it from Unity and further augment it through Odyssey. For the body slot, you want to use the Adamar Jacket +1. This will give you a strength boost of 26, a dex boost of 33, an attack boost of 35, and then if you pick Path B, an additional strength boost of 12, dex boost of 12, and an attack boost of 20. You can get the initial drop off of Pekit in Eshin Ruan, and then need to further uncurse it with an item you buy off the auction house for 20 to 30 million gil. Next, for the hands, you want to use the Adhamar Wristbands +1. So give you a strength boost of 15, a dex boost of 44, and then if you pick Path B, a strength boost of 12, a dex boost of 12, and an attack boost of 20. You can get this off of Parathos in Eshin Ruan, and then further uncursing it off an item you buy off the auction house for 15 to 20 million gil. Let's move on to the ring slots. Here there's a little bit of a difference. No matter what in the left ring slot, you want to use the Gear Ring. Give you a strength boost of 10, an attack boost of 16. You can get this off the HTMB where you fight Odin 2. Now in regards to the rings, you want to use the Regal Ring in your right finger, which has a strength boost of 10, a dex boost of 10, and an attack boost of 20. You can get this off of O and Omen. Now you want to use this whenever you have a trust setup. Meanwhile, if you're in a hyper buff situation, you want to use the Epam Mimnota's Ring. This gives you a weapon skill damage boost of 5%, and you can get it off the auction house for 70 to 100 million gil. For our back piece, like always, an Andartia's Mantle, this time with the augment of Dex +30, weapon skill damage +10%, accuracy and attack +30, and of course, like always, you can get and augment this through Ambuscade. For the waist, you should go with the Salafi Belt +1. It'll give you an attack boost of 10 to 15, and if you augment it, it will give you an additional 15 strength. You can get this originally from Unity and then augment it through Odyssey. For the leg slot, I suggest the Mochizuki Hakama +3. This will give you a strength boost of 42 and an attack boost of 64, and then additionally increase your weapon skill damage by 10%. This brings us to the final slot, the feet slot. This is one of the more confusing ones when it comes to Blade Metsu. Now clearly the best in slot option is the Herculean Boots, which will give you strength +16, dex +24, attacks +10, and then you need absolutely perfect augments on them for this to be best in slot. Those include dex +10, attack and accuracy +25, and weapon skill damage +5%. If you have all of those augments, this will be best in slot. Now I will say these are incredibly difficult to get. I've tried literally thousands of times on many pieces to get those specific augments and been unable, so it is not an easy thing to achieve. You get this drop off of Belfour in Resenma. Now unless you have absolutely all of those augments, then one of these other two pieces is going to be best in slot for your situation. At 10 DPS less than those ideal augments is the Adamar Gamish's +1. Now you should only be using this in a trust setup, which is where this excels. It will give you a strength boost of 15, a dex boost of 23, and an attack boost of 34. Additionally, if it's on Path B, a strength boost of 12, a dex boost of 12, and an attack boost of 20. You can get this off of Sava Savang in Eshin Rowan, and then you have to further uncurse it for buying something off the auction house for 10 to 15 million gil. Now, if you are in a hyper buff situation, then the best in slot and only 5 DPS less than the Herculean Boot's best augment is the Kendut Saba Sunate +1. This will give you a strength boost of 20, a dex boost of 44, and you can get this off the auction house for 35 to 40 million gil. That will be it for the Blade Metsu video. The next 3 guides in the A Guide to Ninja series will cover Blade 10, Blade Camu, and finally, Blade Ku. Thanks for watching. Everyone stay safe and stay healthy.